Hey everybody, it's Sean and Julie from Chicory's Travels, and we're going to talk about a really cool campground that we just spent the last week at. It's the Outer Banks West KOA, and it's in Currituck Sound, near the right outside of the Outer Banks in North Carolina.
Yeah, and it's called Outer Banks West because Outer Banks are barrier islands, so they're right along the Atlantic Ocean. And then between them and the mainland is this body of water. In our particular area, it was called the Currituck Sound. So we were not on the Atlantic Ocean, we were on the Sound. But this campground is gorgeous because it has water. It's large.
Yeah,
I think it was like
400 and something acres.
yeah, and it had water on two sides of it. So I mean, it was just fabulous, and you can see a little bit of it right back here.
And the nice thing is the campground's all the way at the end of this peninsula, so there's nothing past you. You're completely on the end of it, so it's just campground out there. So it's pretty nice.
Yeah, it's beautiful and it's peaceful, but at the same time, they have a lot going on, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But first, we wanted to talk about the types of sites they have. This is one thing that we really like about KOAs is that they give you a lot of options. So the first choice that you have to make if you're staying here and in an RV site is, do you want waterfront or do you want what's called inland? So right behind you here, you can see we're at an inland site. What that means is we're not directly on the water, but you can see the water. And particularly in this case, because we were there in during the week this photo was taken, so all of the waterfront sites weren't taken. But even when over the weekend we did have people on the waterfront site, you could still see the water in between them.
Yeah, and we were at a deluxe back-in patio site, so we had a nice little patio and a fire pit. All the deluxe sites had this type of furniture that you see in the photo, and it's really like good beachy kind of furniture, very solid. And it was really nice, and the fire pits are really big and also a good distance from your RV, so you don't have to worry about any embers or anything like that if you have a wood fire. And you can see how wide the site was because you can't see an RV on either side of us. And that was another thing that we really liked about it.
Yeah, but if you don't want to pay the extra, the deluxe sites or patio sites, they're called, are a little bit extra. You could also get a standard site. So the standard sites, the only difference is they don't have the stone fire pit. They have a standard fire pit. They have a picnic table instead of the fancy furniture, and they're a little bit more narrow. So that's the main difference. And if you look at the campground map, you can kind of get a sense of that. But they do have pull-throughs and back ends. The great thing about this back end, I was telling Sean it would be really wonderful for people who had children too, because it backs up to this large field that is, you can see the playground from it.
Yeah. And the sites, the back end sites aren't, they're more at an angle for the non-seasonal sites. And so I was grateful for that because our children, one of our sons and daughter-in-law and grandson came and they actually rented an RV and got right next to us. And as soon as we got there, Julie hopped out and started visiting with them. And so I had no help backing in. So I was glad to have it at a slight angle so it was easier to maneuver into that site.
Yeah, and Sean also mentioned that there are seasonal sites as well. So if you look on the campground map again, you'll see that there's one section where people can rent seasonal sites at a discount. They are a little bit closer together, and they're all on the far end of the campground. So that is another option though, and they do have both waterfront and inland on those. And then there's also tent sites.
Yeah.
And those were all on the front side of the campground near this wooded nature trail area. So you have tent sites. Oh, speaking of RV rentals, so we rented an RV from Outdoorsy, and we're going to be having a video on that process coming up soon. But this campground also has their own RV rentals, and I just didn't know about it. So I had rented one to be delivered from Outdoorsy, but that's a nice option too. They had a whole row of their own RV rentals. And then they also have like the KOA cabins, but theirs are really cute. They're painted to look more like beach cottages. So definitely a lot of different options with a lot of different price points if you're looking to stay at this KOA. So now let's talk about what we loved about the campground aside from our campsite. And one was all the activities.
Yeah.
So I picked this particular weekend and week because every weekend they have activities. And this particular weekend we were there, they had wine tasting. And they also had, though, plenty of crafts for the kids all day. They had this lady who had a converted schoolie that was kind of like an art studio, and she brought all this stuff, and they had different arts and crafts. And then they also had adult wine and craft where you could paint a wine glass.
And then this coming up weekend, the weekend after we were there, they're having an 80s band. And they actually said they're completely sold out for this 80s band. So that's a pretty popular one, but they also have some fall weekends where they're doing different fall things, and of course Halloween coming up.
Yeah, and everything's on their website to show all of the different activities that they have. So there's definitely a lot going on, and the thing I liked about how large this KOA is, things are spread out. And because of that, if you don't want to participate in the planned activities, you can still enjoy peace and quiet. You know, you pick on the map where you want to be, and if you're not a joiner, or you don't have kids and you don't want to be near the playground or things like that, just let them know. Request, if you're requesting a waterfront site, maybe request down on another end, or if you're requesting inland, request that it's farther on the other end. So I found them to be very accommodating. Like we said, our son and daughter-in-law were there, and we requested to be side by side, and they accommodated us.
Yeah, and they have golf cart rentals, which is helpful if you have if you generate a lot of trash, because the trash is off away from the RV site, so it's a bit of a walk to take your trash. So a golf cart was a good way to do that. And then also they have lots of waterfront. There's a little trail where only golf carts are allowed, and you can go and fish right from the campground in the Sound. And so lots of people took golf carts down there to carry all their fishing gear and bring their catches back. And there's also several piers that you can go out on.
But what he meant by golf carts only, you can walk down there.
Yeah.
You just can't drive your car.
Right.
So we walked down there every day. And like Sean said, it was 5 piers. And some of the piers specifically said for fishing, and some of them were specifically for swimming, no fishing. So you didn't have to worry about fishing line or hooks or anything being in the water where you wanted to swim. But we walked down to the different piers every day in the morning and in the evening, because they just had beautiful sunrises and gorgeous sunsets, and it was just lovely. I mean, they just have a very large waterfront area.
Yeah, and they also had 2 freshwater ponds for fishing, and we were walking around one of the ponds on the last day we were there, and we saw 3 turkeys. So it's pretty cool out there. It's nice nature. There's not a lot of development, I would say, right around there.
And the nature trails, sometimes at KOAs, the nature trail is just like this really tiny little short thing, but this was like 3 different trails that all kind of were like interconnecting, and like Sean said, 2 small, well, 1 small and 1 a little bit larger fishing pond, and then there was even a section back at the very back of the nature trail that looked like it was like the intercoastal type, waterway, like that brackish water, I think they call it. So yeah, it was just really, really pretty and really nice. And we just had a great time there. And our dog did too.
Yeah. Yeah, so for amenities, they have quite a few things. They have a dog park like most KOAs do.
But this was a large
It was big,
dog park,
yeah. Toby was able to run around a little bit. They have a big playground for the kids with one of those bouncy mat things. I don't know what they're called.
Yeah, I don't either. Jumping pillow or something. But the playground, I was like, wow, these kids have to be pretty brave to go down the slide, because it's almost like a 2nd story level. It's a really big play area that they have. In addition to the activities for kids. And then they also have, we talked about waterfront and how you could fish and just enjoy the views, but they also had rentals of kayaks and stand-up paddle boards, or if you have your own, there were two different launch areas that I saw. So we also rented kayaks one day. Well, we did a double.
Yeah.
They had single and double kayaks, and we rented a double and had a really good time. Just the water was pretty calm.
Yeah. Yeah, it was nice. We paddled out. Probably we were out there for about 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was nice. And they also have a camp store, which we had to visit a few times when our kids were there because you need extra stuff, even though they're adults. But we did have a grandbaby with us, but extra stuff. And the nice thing was they had an ABC license, so they sold beer and wine, and it was local beer and wine.
Yeah.
So we got to sample some of the local beer right at the campground there, which was nice. But they also had, geez, everything from sweatshirts and clothing to kitchen items to fire stuff to RV accessories that are commonly broken or you forget. So yeah, we didn't really have to go to a store, which is nice because the nearest Walmart I think was 32 miles away.
Yeah. The nearest Walmart I think was all the way at the regular Outer Banks, like what the ocean side that people think of. But speaking of that, let's talk about the local area for a little bit, because we talked about local beer and wine. So only maybe, I think it was 18 minutes on the navigator, it said, to get to this local farmers market, which was really cool because they had, on the weekend, they had live music, they had food, prepared food that you could purchase, a big outdoor bar. They were having wagon rides, hay rides, and
it was
stuff
pet friendly.
Scarecrow, yeah, pet friendly. We took Toby with us. In addition to just the huge indoor farm market, which in addition to produce, it had baked goods and fudge and just boiled peanuts. I got some boiled peanuts that I love. So a lot of stuff. But there was also a brewery nearby that did tours and had a restaurant, and there was a winery nearby.
And then lots of historic stuff, lighthouses, national seashores down on the Outer Banks. We actually went to the Wright Brothers National Historic Site. We felt like we had to go since we were retired Air Force to go see where powered flight actually first started, and that was pretty cool to see the progression. And lots of beachy kind of tourist stuff when you go out onto the Outer Banks proper. And one thing that we did, our son was with us and he really likes hot stuff, so we went to this store, Pepper Palace, and sampled a bunch of different hot sauces. So yeah, lots to do in the area. You definitely won't be bored unless you want to be.
Yeah, and just so you know, though, if you're trying to get to that touristy part and the Atlantic Ocean part of the Outer Banks, the nearest beach, we did go to the beach twice in the week that we were staying here, and it's a 45-minute drive to the beach, and then the lighthouses and the Wright Brothers thing is a national
historic site.
And so it's run by the National Park Service, so that's pretty cool. And that was about an hour because that was a little bit further south from where the nearest beach is. But again, you don't have to. You could enjoy like your whole time just at this campsite. And as a matter of fact, we want to go back, and when we do, we probably won't even go out to the main part of the Outer Banks. We only did that one time because, like Sean said, we felt like we really should. But now that we've seen it, we'd probably just spend the whole time at the campground because there was just, so much natural beauty and activities to do right there.
Yeah, and the military has a few bases around there, so we saw several days there were either helicopters flying over or different fighters, military aircraft flying over, which is always nice to see and hear. And then at the campground, they did have a laundry room.
Yep, they had laundry room, and they had, I think, two different areas that had the bathrooms because one was at the back of the camp store, which I forgot to mention. It was also behind the arcade. There's an arcade, a big game room there as well. So it was back behind that. It looked like there were a couple showers, and then I peeked into the ones that were co-located with the laundry room, which was right next to the dog park. And those were the ones that I really like that a lot of KOAs have, because it's not like locker room style. It's you go in and you shut the door behind you, and it's your own bathroom and shower all together. And you could go in as, a family if you had kids and stuff with you, and you wouldn't have to worry about like the little boys not wanting to go into a room with little girls and things like that.
And then most importantly, I think the staff were all super friendly.
They were. Everyone was so nice, from the people at the front desk to the people checking out the kayaks and in the camp store. Oh, and in the camp store, the people who were selling the ice cream, because they also had, in the camp store, they had a little like snack bar, and it had ice cream and I think like pizza, chicken nuggets, things like that.
So we hope you enjoyed this overview of the Outer Banks West KOA. We certainly had a great time there, and look forward to going back in the future. And maybe we'll see you there, but if not, safe
Safe
travels.
travels.